I grew up in a home where my father, a theology professor, read to my two brothers and me the delightfully neo-medieval stories of C.S. Lewis, J.R.R. Tolkien, George MacDonald, and others. These were influences in shaping not only my imagination, but also the faith I would find as a young adult. From the moment Christianity became my heart language, I searched its vocabulary and traditions for the angles of vision first opened to me in those early literary stirrings. Where I found these angles, they tended to help me move forward in my faith. Where I did not find them, I wondered why not. Since then, I've never lost my fascination with either those modern authors or the medieval world they loved. Of course, they sometimes romanticized that world, but they also, as we'll see, took it quite seriously as a source of wisdom for living. During my doctoral program in American church history at Duke University, a band of friends formed an Inklings group. Together we read and discussed those same medieval-influenced authors, reaching for the older Christian wisdom from which they drew. After Duke, I took a job editing Christian History magazine at Christianity Today. While there, I edited issues and wrote articles on Lewis and Tolkien, as well as G.K. Chesterton, author of two splendid biographies of important medieval Christians, Dorothy L. Sayers, translator of Dante and medieval French literature, and others. At the same time, I was able to continue my exploration, begun in graduate school, of such medieval thinkers as Bernard of Nursia, about 480 to 543, Bernard of Clairvaux, 1090 to 1153, and the scholastic precursors of the scientific revolution. In those years, I began work on my first book, Patron Saints for Postmoderns, in which I explore the medieval worlds and worldviews of Gregory the Great, 540 to 604, Dante Alighieri, 1265 to 1321, and Marjorie Kemp, about 1373 to sometime after 1438, among others. All of this began to prepare me to see beyond modern caricatures of the medieval church to the animating Christian spirit of that age. But at the same time, I was becoming more and more acutely aware of certain realities of the church today, especially its evangelical Protestant forms, that make it hard for modern Christians truly to receive medieval wisdom. When in 2004, I flew from Chicagoland to Minnesota to interview for a church history position at Bethel Seminary, the interviewers asked what period I thought my evangelical students would most need to hear about. I did not yet entirely know why, but I blurted out, "The Middle Ages." I soon found ample evidence, both negative and positive, to back up that impulsive answer. In my first year at Bethel, the evangelical-authored textbook I chose to use with my classes proved embarrassingly incomplete and biased in its treatment of medieval faith. Even after I found better sources and began sharing the good as well as the bad and the ugly in my lectures on the period, some of my students seemed unable to surmount their preconceptions. The state ruled the church, money corrupted the church and prevented it from helping the people, the Bible was taken away from the people, the monastics failed to evangelize or engage the culture, etc. Slowly, as I learned how to better teach the period, some of my students began to find rich resources in the disciplines of the monastics, the devotion of the mystics, the intellectual passion of the scholastics, and much more. Formerly suspicious of all things medieval, these students began to discover and value some of the wisdom this book points to. Increasingly, though, I wondered about the hole in modern popular accounts of church history, particularly the glaring omission of the story of medieval faith except as a cautionary tale. Why did my students and friends so often seem to assume that the church apostatized after it gained cultural influence in the time of Constantine, 4th century, and returned to God only after the 16th-century Reformation, or perhaps even only after the evangelical revivals of the 18th century? Why this dismissal of more than a millennium of church history, more than half of the time between Christ and today? This book leads to and culminates in what I have found to be the wisest piece of medieval wisdom. Creation and incarnation are not rote doctrines to be learned, committed to memory, and ignored in our daily practice, but rather are practical linchpins of what it means to lead a good human life in the light of the gospel.